Right. So first, some introductions. I am Aaron Cassidy. I'm professor of composition and the director of the Center for Research in New Music, or CERN-M, at the University of Huddersfield. And really pleased to have now the second round of these artist-to-artist conversations in partnership with hcmf and City University London, and with partnerships with specifically with Claudia Molitor and Graham Mackenzie. And each of us have curated now, this is our second wave of these artist-to-artist conversations. I am joined today by two extraordinary composers, Anne Cleare and Carola Bauckholt. Anne is joining us from Ireland, and Carola, Carola, I don't know where you are at the moment. I haven't asked you that yet. Where are you?
I am in Freiburg, where I'm living in Germany.
Excellent. So a very typical Zoom gathering from three totally different places. I'm in the outskirts of Huddersfield. Anne, just some quick introductions. Anne Cleare is assistant professor at Trinity College Dublin, and a whole slew of significant prizes and commissions and awards and major performances. I suppose most notably the winner of the Siemens Composers Prize in 2019. And a similar profile from Carola, a long list of major awards and commissions. Carola is currently the professor of composition at the Anton Bruckner Private Universität in Linz in Austria. These artist-to-artist conversations, one of the premises of these conversations when it was initially set up by Claudia Molitor was the idea of putting two composers, two artists together in conversation, quite open, fluid, not an interview, but with the idea that these might be two people whose work wouldn't necessarily be put side by side, or who don't necessarily know each other already, or aren't necessarily working in the same circles, and also part of the idea was to invite people into conversation who were at different points in their careers or coming from different kinds of backgrounds. So I think that we've done that here. What I wanted to say as a kind of starting point, and then I'll remove myself from this conversation and let you talk. Both of you, for me, have really interesting approaches in two areas that might be an interesting place to start the conversation. The first is a real kind of fluidity about how you approach the kind of disciplinary boundaries of your work. So work that crosses into versions of musical theater, some elements of kind of installation work. There's a kind of multidisciplinary element for both of you. And I find that incredibly interesting. And I guess in particular, one of the things I'm interested in is how you approach the space of performance and the ways that music might engage with that space. The other big area that for me is really interesting as a kind of common thread for both of you is your approach to instruments, which is really fluid and really open. And there's a kind of experimental energy with the approach to sonic resources and instrumental resources, that you both seem to see instruments as being sources of really innovative, interesting, unusual kinds of sound. So that's maybe two ways that the conversation might go along the way. At the very least, thank you so much for joining us, and I'm really looking forward to hearing how this goes. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. Hello,
yes.
Carola, again.
Hi, Anne. Yes, I'm really happy to have the possibility to speak, to talk with you now, which we would never do.
Yeah, and it's funny, like what Aaron said, because I suppose the last few weeks since I've known I'd be talking to you, I've been listening to some of your work, and it makes sense what Aaron said. I'm almost like, how have we not met before, or like shared programs? Because we really do have a lot in common, I think.
Yes, I'm very interested in how you come to your sounds, because I have the impression you go with your own hands looking for sounds. You touch them, you yes, you work with material to produce sound. And I think this is a very common approach we have. And I would love to know a bit more about that.
Yeah, well, I suppose I do find actually before sound, I feel like I generally have to have an idea for a piece. So it's generally, I wouldn't know what the sound world is, but there has to be kind of some concept at play for me in order for me to need to go and find a sound or to experiment with a sound. I feel like there almost has to be some kind of, for me, it's quite visual in my mind, like some kind of scene, some kind of place, whether it's like real or imagined or a mixture of both. And then I suppose when I know what I want to explore about that particular place, should we say, then I go in search of the sound to kind of evoke it and so on. So, and yeah, that's where I start to experiment, I guess, a bit. And I suppose, yeah, I do work a lot with instruments, like just experimenting, finding the sound materials, just trying to narrow things down. Like even for me, I think the first parameter I really work with is dynamics. You know, I really know in a piece, before I know like the general register or the timbre kind of world, I know when something will be quiet, when something will be loud, when, you know, in between all the kind of points on that scale. That seems to be quite important for me, I think. And then I move on to things like register, and all the time thinking about, you know, what an instrument can do that would be the most evocative for a certain moment in the piece or whatever. So yeah, the sounds do, they start to relate to the place, I suppose, and that's my kind of way of working with them.
Okay, in this Siemens film, I saw you working in this Schlosserei, so where they work with metal.
Yeah. Yeah, like it was a metal workshop. So they're kind of sculptors, welders working there.
So you went there with the idea to find which kind of sound? What was the idea to go there?
Yeah, well, I think with that particular piece, you know, I was trying to build this percussion instrument, and it was related to, you know, the movie Edward Scissorhands. I love this film so much. You know, it's don't know if you know it. It's where there's a main character, Edward, and he has scissors as hands. So yeah, I mean, I've been interested in it for most of my life for various reasons, but I also, I suppose I wanted to create a piece where a percussionist doesn't just play, you know, instruments that are on a table, but that their hands are percussive, like the hands are a percussive instrument in themselves. So I had that, I suppose that's, in terms of what I was saying about concept before, that would have been what was leading me. So I didn't know what the sound material would be yet, but I knew that that's where I was trying to go with the piece. And then in the film, I think it shows me looking for materials in this kind of old, well, I suppose it's a kind of, it belongs to the boglands here in the middle of Ireland where I'm from. So the region has been very well known for harvesting peat and turf. And so the machinery that was used to do that over the last decades isn't being used anymore because, you know, the industry is kind of slowly transitioning to something more sustainable and so on. So a lot of the machinery is up for grabs at the moment in terms of giving it to artists to let them recycle it. So I was looking for metallic materials to work with, and that I could bring to a sculptor then to actually weld into something for me, like into this kind of hand percussion. So yeah, I suppose that would be an example of the kind of process that I'm talking about, kind of building my way to sound from an idea, I suppose. Yeah. I mean, I try to weld a little bit myself, but it's I'm not very good at it. I would love to be able to kind of weld metals and know how to meld them. But yeah, it's hard to have time. You need to be really good at it to obviously make an instrument that lasts, you know, that like is durable. And yeah, I haven't quite reached that level yet.
Or to find good partners.
Yeah, that's...
Percussionists are such good partners.
Yeah,
from my approach.
Yeah, that's so true. I always say that to students too. I think it takes a certain type of person to be a percussionist almost. Like they have to be flexible because, you know, their setup is always changing, whether someone is working with more standard percussion or kind of newly invented percussion. Yeah, they have to be flexible and curious, I think.
Yes, and they often build instruments. Yes, and for example, I for one piece, hellhörig, I used a cookie tin with a steel ball rolling on it, and it makes amazing sounds.
Yeah.
And then the cookie tin was broken, and I didn't find another one. And Thomas Meixner, a percussionist from this Schlagquartett Cologne, he can work with metal, and he made one cookie tin, but it's for a percussionist, so that it's really easy for the ball to circle. It doesn't fall apart, and it sounds amazing. So through this, I got a wonderful instrument.
Yeah. I remember being in Ensemble Mosaic's studio in Berlin, and I was rehearsing with Ernst, their pianist, and he had this beautiful, don't know what you would call it, like it was like an auxiliary kind of instrument sitting on the piano, but really neatly. It was like a wooden frame, and he told me it was yours. So I feel like I've met something of yours before I actually met you.
Now I know really where it
lovely.
is. I rented it to him. I gave it to him. It's always away. It's just to fix the arcos. You know,
okay,
when you play
yeah.
with arco inside piano, and it's going to be a mess if you use many. And
Yeah.
I just fix it with gums there, and then it's easy to manage.
It was a bit like a coat hanger, or like but for smaller things. Yeah. Well, that was a good while ago, I should say. Maybe he's returned it by now then.
I don't have it, but I always give it to the people who perform my pieces, and mostly I let it with them, hoping that they will do it again.
Yeah, and do you build something like that yourself, or do you work with someone to build?
Not systematically, so I try out myself. For example, for one piece, hellhörig, it was for Münchner Biennale in 2008. And I thought I would not do it with words, no libretto. And I thought, let's try last time maybe again to make an opera without words. And I thought my sounds, my noises will be the libretto. They tell so much. Noises are telling so much and evoking visual imaginations that, yeah. So noises are so rich in telling. And for this, I thought systematically I need a huge palette of noise producers because noises are very often so high frequent. And there I was asking again the percussionist, how is it possible to really get deep noises? Deep instruments which create deep noises. And then they told me just take a big box or a big tin, or it depends on the size. And we discovered this the gift boxes made out of cardboard, you know. You can buy it in every size in the shops.
Yeah.
And when you rub them on wood with rosin, it really creates a big palette of wonderful sounds in every register. And so then, of course, I took it myself and I tried out how is it possible to get some ideas. And then I go to work with a musician, and of course they are much better, and find out more techniques to really control this possibility of the new instruments. Yeah, so mostly it's quite simple material. So not like Harry Partch did.
Okay. Oh, you mean like easier to find the components of the instrument, like the cardboard and so on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm not I don't have the partners to build, and I think I like to have simple material with huge possibilities. It's the best.
Yeah. Yeah, I did see a snippet of the piece you mentioned online, the theatre piece. It was just maybe like a 3-minute compilation of it, but I do remember the boxes definitely, and also yeah, as you say, it really is a libretto kind of driven by noise material in a way, and quite a lot of, even in just the few minutes I saw, a lot of space too. You know, you kind of this kind of background of more static noise, and then I would say then yeah, more kind of gestural noise based as well. But it felt like I don't know, something like a kind of noise song in a way, like something, well, the way it was kind of shaped somehow, which is really interesting, especially because next year I'm writing a music theatre piece, and it's and I wrote one maybe a few years ago now, and I found it so hard, and I'm really you know, I want to do this new one, but at the same time it's kind of terrifying. It's, you know, that kind of feeling of trepidation. You're very excited, but you're also really terrified of it as well. And I think for me a lot has to do with when I'm working in music theatre, and as Aaron said, a lot of my pieces, and I think your pieces too, they have kind of theatrical elements, you know, even in concert pieces. But I think I wonder a lot about text, really. Like, do I use text or do I not use text? Like what you were saying, do you say, no, look, noise can communicate so much, or do you give up a lot by not using text? I don't know. I wonder just how you feel about that, given the snippet that I saw.
Yes, it's a huge discussion. And so especially me, I have some problems with words. I feel narrowed with words. And I go under the words immediately. So for me, the words are not helping. But I think it would be wonderful if you could solve that problem.
That's what terrifies me, though.
Yes. And per random, I know that you are working with L.A. Kennedy, right?
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
For
So
this
she's
new
written
production.
she's written the libretto for the piece. Yeah.
And of course, she is a wonderful thinker and
Yeah, she
personality.
is.
It's amazing. Yeah, so it's even more terrifying. And there's more than words, because there is a political statement, let's say, behind it. So it's a fantastic setup, I would say, to work. And are you in discussion with her how to solve?
Yeah. Most of the last year we've been talking on Zoom. We haven't actually met in person, but we achieved a lot, I think, over Zoom. And we came up with an idea for the opera together. And then she got to work on the libretto, and she delivered it a few weeks ago now. So the libretto is done. I mean, it's open to editing still, I think. So it will continue to be a collaborative process. But I have to say, at the same time, I felt like in the last music theatre work that I wrote back in 2015, it was about a half-hour long piece, like a kind of chamber opera.
How is
and
it
I feel
called?
like
How is it?
It's called Rinn, Rinn,
yes.
Which is a kind of Irish word that suggests a kind of point in a landscape where you can see everything. It's kind of like a 360-degree viewing place. But even beyond the concept, I felt in that opera, I spent the whole opera trying to give myself permission to have the singers sing in the piece and to have actual text, very recognizable text. And I was a bit angry at myself after it, because I was like, why would I put myself through this half hour to do that? Whereas with this, I think when I decided to write the piece, that I kind of felt, and I suppose since that piece too, I have worked with text more. But when this opportunity came up, I said, I'm really going to work with text now. I mean, it doesn't mean I give up my language of noise and shaping sounds, but I felt like, I suppose the actual idea of the piece, that I needed the text somehow to really make clear to people what was being explored. But yeah, it's still something I know I have to work on somehow, to meld those two worlds of text and my own compositional language.
Yes, and of course the text don't need to be sung. So singing is one thing and text is another thing. It don't has to be always connected, let's say. Because you can see text, so with projection you can listen spoken. I think this melodrama genre is really interesting too, if the people speak. So I don't know the text of her, I only know political texts of her.
Yeah.
Maybe I have a bit wrong, not a complete image of L.A. Kennedy.
Yeah, well, her novels and short stories are there's always, I think, a political I wouldn't even say undertone or overtone. It's very present. But they're also they're very psychological, I think. In some ways, there's not a lot of written of spoken dialogue between people. It's often like this monologue happening. So we're kind of hearing someone's internal thoughts and internal dialogue. So there's very little actual dialogue between people in her work, and that would be the same in the opera. There's a lot of internal conversation. So that's interesting to work with as well, I think, rather than actually people singing at each other.
Yeah, but this is good. So text could be a text composition with noise.
Yeah.
And with layers of text, and yeah. Oh, it's really interesting how you will work with this. And the problem is it necessary to understand or not? Or is it sound material?
Yeah. Yeah, or somewhere, I suppose, exploring the boundaries between as well, maybe. Yeah. But I would love to know, Carola, like in terms of like process and the way you work with sound, like what guides you in a piece when you're first starting to work on it, to developing it, to getting it to a final stage? Is it different all the time, or?
Perhaps not. For me, it's different, but perhaps from an outer perspective, it's not so different. I think I'm always starting with sound material. So with one detail of sounding, what I have listened to or so. So very concrete on sound. And then one detail gave the other one. And perhaps there is a concept somehow in one moment. It's a bit different to the piece, but I have to say it's based on sound experience and experiments with the sound itself. And for this, I agree completely with you that music theater is so difficult to think because you have all the other elements. And it's funny that I'm kind of labeled music theater, but there is no opera, or there are smaller setups and very experimental, because the theater itself is it's a world, another world with another rules, and so yes, and so my kind of music theater is very coming from the sound itself or from visual aspects itself. So now too, I'm working in a piece together with the animation filmer Lizzie Hobbs from London, and we did a collaboration, and I really love how she works. And now we want to have a piece where we really react on each other. So, and this is so hard to find a way to cooperate.
You mean in this present moment, or in general, to find a kind of a way that
to cooperate with, if you have music theater, you have. So in Hellhörig, the older piece you mentioned, where you there, my job was only writing music, because there was director and stage builder, and so everything was divided, and it ended up being music with lights, and so they didn't add any scenery or so. It was a surprise for me that it worked like this, but the sound production was so interesting that they don't felt to build a scenery. Yeah, so this was quite easy. But when I think at the same time on the scene and actions or whatever, visuals, then it's really complex.
Yeah. So at the same time, I think of the pieces I saw of yours online, where it's just a live concert video, I do feel like there's a lot of attention given to how, like, where the musicians are and even how much space there is between them. You know, especially I'm thinking, I mean, even the excerpts I saw from the music theater piece, it did feel like a scene to me in a way.
Yeah.
Like not, it wasn't a concert stage either.
Yeah,
So maybe there is more attention to maybe I mean, theater does seem like, to me too, it does seem a step too far for me to describe some concert pieces I have as theater, just because they really engage with space and placement of musicians and so on. But I don't know what the other word is. Like, I think also there's an attention to kind of choreography in your music. Like, maybe it's not always intentional, but just because even the piano parts, they involve the pianist moving to play parts of the piece, and it just feels, I think, to people that there's an attention to movement and to space.
Yeah, perhaps it happens. So if you don't have a conductor and if you don't have music stands, theater appears very easily. And so my music is quite clear in communication, sound communication, and this communication elements between the musicians. If you put light on it, then it's kind of theater.
Yeah.
So it depends a bit on if the music has more concrete situation. For example, you're with your scissor hands idea. When you see a percussionist with this instrument, it becomes it's no more a percussionist. It's a surrealistic actor. And the instrument too. If you don't know it, then it very easily became a theater aspect. If it's connected with something which happens in the music. So in which piece is this scissor percussion?
It's in a piece called EOL, which is just a play on Aeolian, really.
Okay.
Because the piece, even though the percussionist part is quite metallic and percussive and sharp, there's also a small chamber group behind the percussionist, and they begin the piece, and it's kind of a more wind-like sound, and the percussion instrument develops from that. So yeah, that's why it's called that. And then I call the instrument the as well.
Yeah. So I would say with music theater, it's not so important to put action or to put something in. Or we can let the element space, the visual elements, or the space, we can let it, it's speaking if we are aware of it.
Yeah.
So it doesn't need so much action. I think light is incredibly important.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So music and lights, and if light is without a functional reason, but with a musical reason, then it becomes theater already.
Yeah, it's hard. I think a lot of concert venues still aren't really, well, for classical or contemporary music, aren't really built for light yet. Like, I feel like I often ask about lighting at concerts, and you have some smart sarcastic engineer who's like, well, there's two options, there's like on and there's off. Like, it is a real shame, I think, in concerts that more attention isn't given to the presentation of the music. That it's so hard, I think, for audiences to grasp. It's an extra kind of barrier, I think, when we don't pay attention to things like lighting, to how the musicians are placed and so on, that there's kind of this idea that the music can do everything on its own, but almost like as if the visuals just don't matter. But I think they really do to people. I think it's really important in concerts to give attention to visual presentation of work as well. Otherwise, it can just be very confusing, I think, for people.
Yes, and mostly something is happening visually, like all this Visualisierung of, so all the films with music, and it's always too much. It's not connected with the sound activity. Yeah, so I can understand you completely, how difficult it is.
But do you mentioned working with the animator in I suppose trying, I don't know if exactly if what you're aiming for is to merge languages or get to know each other's language and find a way of kind of working together. But that would be important to you, I guess, in terms of what you mentioned about film, and that the two languages kind of need to be in sync somehow.
Yes, exactly. It seems so easy because we both have the rhythm as a connecting point. The rhythm, visual rhythm, is for film so important, and for music too. And both is so easily to connect because they have this timeline like we have. So I feel very close to that. And with the computer now, it's so easy to try out things. And so I thought it's very easy to have something where the animation is kind of instrument, and it really fits together like a, yeah, to bring it in one level together. So for example, just for testing, I wrote a score because she needs to know the timing. A score with some MIDI sounds, so actions. So I have the percussionist, Jennifer Torrance, and the pianist Ellen Ugelvik from Oslo. These are the musicians. And so I wrote just action, rhythm for piano, for percussion, and for video, so for animation with sounds. I put some flutes, winds for animation, and percussion for piano and percussion. And then I gave her the score, an audio file of the score, and she put images exactly for all the flute sounds.
Okay.
So it's very easy. And I thought, yeah, it doesn't make sense because it's only, the connection is only in rhythm. But it seems an interesting work, but we are in the situation now that we don't know yet where it will lead us.
Yeah, but I'm sure there are maybe ways, obviously, as you know, to connect on other parameters too. I guess it has to be a kind of building block situation too, that you find other ways to connect then as well. Even I think like I'm working with a visual artist, so I'm trying to kind of finish a orchestra piece at the moment, which is such a kind of crazy pursuit in the middle of a pandemic to just be thinking about. So it's a piece for orchestra and large choir and 3 solo voices. And it wants to happen next month, but obviously it's the least pandemic friendly piece imaginable, really. So I don't know when it will ever happen, but there is some film in it as well from Irish artist Alvin E. Rinn. And I guess we worked also on, well, some of the film that I'm using is pre-existing film of hers that I saw and that I really loved, and for me it visually was the world that I was imagining for this piece that I was going to write. So it made sense to incorporate that. But I think for that, the reason for that was maybe, I suppose in some ways her work is quite still, like she's very focused on one kind of scene, and then she's very, I suppose, skillful at how something changes in that scene. There's generally a process of some kind where things become quite blurry, or some things become blurry, or some things, because she works, I think, with animation too, so she overlays these very impossible kind of places, but they look like a place. They look like an actual existing place, but then you look at the components and you're like, wait, that couldn't live with that, like in reality. So I guess I was drawn to her work because I often also have other, I have, I guess, materials in a piece, often like conflicting materials in a way that, like, they can't really, they coexist in some ways and they find ways to coexist, but also there's a lot of, I don't know, I think people wonder, why are they together? Like, what do they say about each other? Why would you put them together? And I kind of saw that in Alva's work in a way. And then I guess we've been working on new pieces together, and it's interesting I find to try and build a language together, like an audio-visual language, because I guess I learn a lot about what I can do from thinking about how she does things as well. And I feel like this kind of contrapuntal idea in her work, it's really helped me to develop ideas of that within my own work too, like counterpoint and even color for her, I think is very much harmony to me in a way, or whatever my version of harmony is.
And at the end, the film will be all the time, and the music?
Just in parts of the orchestral piece.
Okay, so you compose something which leads to the film, and then it's without.
Yeah.
So it's like somebody is entering the stage and...
Yeah, it is. It's a bit scary. That again, that on off feels very, in some ways it feels a bit alien to me. Again, like the light switch, you know, the on off. But then
I think on is easy, off is more difficult.
Well, the piece is, I suppose, quite sectional in a way. Like there really are, because it's 30 minutes long, so there really are moments where like it's just the orchestra. Then the choirs start to come in and the soloists emerge from the choir. So there really are moments where it's just like a solo singer for 3 minutes, or it's just the choir for 3 minutes, and then moments where they all merge. So in that sense, I kind of think of the film as another soloist in the piece.
Yes. Cool.
And so the singers also appear and disappear, and so on. And I guess I'm just hoping the film can really open up this kind of landscape that I'm trying to explore in the piece as well.
Yeah, I think it's very good that it has only some places, because the visual are normally so strong.
Yeah.
And for this, I can imagine very well that it gives something, and when it's away, it's still there. Yeah, like music too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's yeah, again, it's in some ways it's a bit, I do find it a bit hard to, even when I'm working with the film, I'm so used to just composing the sound element that, yeah, I do have to remind myself to keep tuning into the film in a very active way as well. I suppose there's a lot to think about.
Yeah, but as you say, it's an introduction to the film, and then when it's away, it's like an actor or a singer or something. Yeah, I have always a need that the connection is very strong with each element, all elements, you know.
Yeah.
And this is getting, because we are so detailed with the music. We create so much strong connections in our music. And then the wish is to have the same connections with all other elements.
Mm.
This is the ideal.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I guess even as we talk about motion and movement on stage, I just always wanted to be, I don't know, as clear to the audience what I'm trying to do as possible, rather than confusing. And it's hard because you often get the response that it's so difficult to access because there's so much happening, and you're there kind of trying to make it as transparent as you possibly can. And it's hard. It's something I guess you just keep working on.
Yeah, it's hard and fascinating, because then we get out of our levels, you know. If we jump in all the other things which are there, but really connected somehow, it's really fantastic, because it change our we perceive different, completely different, if there is something out of the box.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think we have to quit. I really wish to be connected more with you and your work.
Yeah, absolutely. When we can travel again. I mean, I'm often in Freiburg. I really love, it's such a lovely town.
Are you?
Well, I mean, I haven't been in the last year or so, but it's a real new music town. I don't really know many towns in the world that feel like a new music town.
I thought so, but there is Ensemble Recherche, Ensemble Aventure, and Experimentalstudio. But that's it.
Oh. Still probably more than many of us have.
We came from Cologne, so.
Well, that's another really great music place.
Yeah, I'm so curious to see your work, what you are doing with L.A. Kennedy. Will it be next year?
Yeah, hopefully. That's when it's scheduled for. But I don't know what will happen with, the pandemic is delaying so much that I don't know, but it's scheduled for next year. Yeah.
I will be there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fantastic,
Let's see how I get on.
fantastic combination, and yeah, with all the power behind.
Yeah.
You have in your music, and she has in her art. It's a very good combination.
Yeah, let's see.
We got the information that we have to end, I'm afraid.
Yeah, we did. Yeah. But it was great to chat, Carola. Really nice. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Anne.
Thank you.